I couldn't choose between two headers to this to the thing about whether it's trust is the new currency, which is, by the way, it's a great phrase. I took it from Davos. It's not mine. And why do we need a newspaper in 2020? This is mine because I'm the one who purchased the newspaper in 2017, and I'm the one who's supposed to answer this question. I'm still looking for the answer. And just a few words about how it started. So Globes was established in 1983. And firstly it was like 2 pages of quotations, like market pricing quotations. And my father, who was a publisher, he bought it after I think it was already been running for about 3 months or so. And he made it a newspaper, a whole newspaper, which is the newspaper that now I own. For 20 years, not for 20 years, but since I was 10 years old, I was working there literally in every aspect of a journal as a child. But then when I was 20 years old, my father passed away. His last request, as bizarre as it sounds, was for me to become an accountant, which I had no idea that this profession existed. But I'm a good kid, and I did it. And then I went for a whole new career. For 20 years, I've been in finance and real estate and business, while my father's partner, Eliezer Fishman, took over the newspaper. And my family became a minority. So it was like 9 years of Stockholm, how do you call it? Stockholm syndrome of mine. And the rest a bitter minority syndrome. And anyway, I didn't think that I'm gonna go back to Globes or to the newspaper industry. I paid, I don't know, I don't want to give you the quotation of how much money did I pay to therapists in order to get rid of the heritage. But so I didn't think I'm gonna go back. But then Eliezer Fishman, my father's partner, went to Israel's biggest bankruptcy to date. It's the Israeli Madoff. And then the bank's receivers, through court, had to sell Globes. And they sold it very successfully to a Russian oligarch. They had no idea where he made his money from. His representative was Nir Hefetz. He's a famous guy in Israel, not notorious regarding newspaper and ethics. And when I saw those are the guys that purchased the Globes, I went to court and I struggled for. It happened to be struggle to purchase the newspaper. I did not intend to do that, but I'm a redhead. They did not respect my rights. Firstly, and secondly, they felt that they sold it to a Russian oligarch. And I went to court. I kind of won. They sent me to a mediation process, and then, like, I don't know, a week later, I was there with a newspaper that I owned. And that's the story. As bizarre it sounds, and now I own a newspaper. I must say that at the same time that I'm in court, there are many things happened in Israel at the same time. One of them was Tik Alpayim, where Bibi Netanyahu and at the time anonymous business person were interacting in the police. And then it was revealed that this is Noni Moses, and it's about Yediot Achronot, Israel's, I don't know, now it's not the biggest, but it's one of the most influential newspapers in Israel. At the same time, Kan 11, it's Israel's broadcasting, channel was also in problems with the government. And I was the one that was stuck with the first refusal of a newspaper. So this was another one of the reasons that now I own a newspaper. And now I take you to the background, the other background of owning a newspaper in 2017 and now in 2020, which is fake news. So fake news, if we go to Collins' dictionary, fake news is false and often sensational information disseminated under disguise of news reporting. So this is like the book definition. But the Telegraph, the newspaper, says that fake news is now seen as one of the greatest threats to democracy, free debate, and the Western order. So we have to take it very seriously, and it's only getting worse, by the way. It was fake news until recently, but now it's deep fake. I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but this is the new election is going to be the deep fake. But the phenomenon did not start now. The protocols of Zion is also fake news. It didn't have the social networks, but this is fake news. And if you know the Mark Twain and Churchill saying that the lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes, this is the more decent way of this phrase. And the problem is not only fake news, it is echo chambers. The echo chambers in which in like 10 minutes you can get anything going on through the entire world now. And the filter bubbles that we take our information now through the social networks, and all we can hear is either the Mark Zuckerberg interests or our friends and family, and now we are getting less and less aware or connected to each other. And in a place like Israel, this is a very disturbing phenomenon. And usually, when a disease is defined, people look for the solution or or even are willing to pay for it. So you could imagine, or we could imagine, in an economic world, that if people are aware of the threat in fake news, they would go to newspapers that check data, that check facts. You could say that that's a reasonable cause, but they don't. There are less and less readers. So this is a question that had to be asked. Why? And this is what we started to ask. And we took, we're trying to analyze what we did wrong or what we do wrong in order for people not to trust us. They know they have fake news. They know there are filter bubbles. They know they should not trust what they get from social networks. And yet, they do not choose to trust us. And why is that? So we are now in sin number 15, and it's getting larger by the minute. So if I'm here like a month from now, it's probably 20, and the apple would be very tiny. There's another 5 sins. But the sins are the lack of self-definition, the sin is that's no transparency, it's trading in public awareness, it's marketing content, which is mind theft, it's agenda journalism. And as you said, Bob, it's opinion and position versus content and information. Focus on the journalist instead of the reader. And clickbaits and conversions. And I'll give you a few examples to that. We tried to show it in a more of a like food industry resemblance, but you guys remember the trans fat? I don't know if you're younger than me, but my mother fed me with Pizza McPizza. You remember Pizza McPizza? It's like trans fat with cheese.
Fake cheese.
Yeah, with a fake microwave. It was amazing. It was also quite disgusting. And very unnutrition, nothing whatsoever. But I'm using the trans fat because as opposed to fake news, which is like people knowingly put false information into our minds, the newspaper are not into putting false information in anyone's mind, but they don't care enough. And that's another problem. That's the trans fat problem. So my mother didn't want to poison me, of course, I think. She just didn't know that it was based on trans fat. People did not know that the newspapers are based on trans fat. They thought they'd get broccoli. And now they're disappointed. And they lost trust. And they were right. And what happened later on, so if in 1869 the trans fat was invented by Napoleon and wanted their soldiers to fight for long hours without costing too much. But 2015, the United States actually banned in a 3-year process the trans fat from the food in the United States. And it already happened. So in 2018, there's no trans fat served in the United States. In Israel, of course, it will take another 100 years, but we're optimistic. And what we're trying to do in Globes is not to wait for this to happen, but to self-regulate ourselves. We think that the journalism has a lot to do with those 15 sins, with the lack of trust. And we think that journalism as well has the power to change it. I'll go through just a few of the sins and things that we are trying to do in order to make it better. So the first one is the lack of self-definition. For 20 years I was in the business sector, and I don't know of a big company or organization that doesn't have vision, values, mission, statement. The only organizations nowadays that I know that don't have any are journals. Newspaper or television, they have no vision, no ethical code, and no regulation whatsoever. I had no idea until I purchased Globes. There is the Moetzet HaItonut, the council, the journalism council. Nobody knows what it does. I'm a new member. I just joined like a month ago, and I joined, and they told me that when I'll join, I'll understand. So I'm still working on it. I still don't know what they do. I know most of the newspapers in Israel are not even members of it. And the ethical code has no relevance to anything that we read. Okay, this is one. And they have no sanction whatsoever. So, as opposed to any other industry, this industry is unregulated. It's even unregulated with self-regulation. And when you don't have words, you probably don't have the right doings. What we did was, firstly, to define a vision. Actually, this is what I did, because I had 48 hours to decide when I was in court if I buy Globes or not, and all I had to do, or all I could do, was write some words about it. So I wrote a vision, and I wrote values. And the vision was about independent media and content that will lead effective and responsible journalism that will strive to achieve intersector trust, to increase Israel's economic growth, which I thought as a financial newspaper I should say something about finance, but actually this was the reason. And, and I wrote the values. And the values were about taking responsibility and accountability and sustainability and business friendliness. After being for 20 years in the business sector, I saw the un-business friendliness that the financial newspapers, including Globes, are having in Israel, and it has a big price. We wrote all of this, and then we also defined Globes' role as reality mediation. So we are actually, I think, nowadays we're the only newspaper or media in Israel that has a vision, values, a role, and we also have an ethical code. The other sin, sponsored content as mindset. I'm going to show you something that is like, I showed it to people from actually New York Times and Economist. Nobody knew that something like this can actually happen. What is sold here is the header of the newspaper. It was sold to Moshe Kachlon before the, not the last elections, but the one before that. So this is an ad. The ad is Israel is choosing Kachlon. I'm surprised that you don't understand that it's an ad, because you see this little word, moda'a. This is your eyes problem. It's you. By the way, this is the only regulation there is. You have to write, it's an ad. Nobody says where, nobody says which font, and how big it is. So it says moda'a, and Israel is choosing Kachlon, and people say that we understand that this is a sponsored content. My mother, who was married for many years to a publisher, so she knows a little bit of her way with newspapers, saw Israel Hayom that day that it was published, and she came home and she said, "Oh my God, I can't believe Israel Hayom is not supporting Bibi anymore." So, obviously, everybody understood that it was, by the way, do you want to know how much it costs? Yes, you do. So it's 70,000 shekels to Kalkalist, 100,000 shekels to Israel Hayom. And I'm the whistleblower of the industry. This is, if you take, this is the real header that day of Israel Hayom. And there is the, go to page 2. It's all of Kahlon, whatever, message to the voters. This is amazing. And as a whistleblower, I wanted to say something about it in Globes. Firstly, we got the same offer. This is why I know how much it costs. And I thought it's quite cheap. So of course we refused. But then I wanted to publish, I wanted Globes to write about it. Apparently newspapers don't like to write about themselves, nor their, thank you. I'm going to use that again. Nor about their competitors. They don't want a bad relationship. In Globes, we are trying to do that, but it takes time. Even we have a great, really amazing editor-in-chief, but she also has problems with writing about her former employees. So I use Facebook at that kind of places, and I told about them in Facebook. And now I don't think something like this will happen again. Because it took, just because I wrote about it. But other than that, it happens constantly and all the times, and they actually sell our minds. So if we talk about lack of trust, this is lack of trust. Agenda journalism, opinion and position versus content and information.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
מעולם לא לקחתי אגורה לכיסי.
Nobody has more respect for women than I do.
אזרחי ישראל, אל תאמינו להשמצות, להכפשות, לשקרים.
המצביעים הערבים מגיעים בכמויות אדירות לקלפי.
Well, I'm not a crook.
עמותות השמאל מביאות אותם באוטובוסים.
אדון ענייה.
Read my lips.
או שאתה מחזיר את הגופות.
I'm the one who will not raise taxes.
או שאתה מת.
מעולם לא נסגר. הוא נסגר בפעם הראשונה בחייו למדינת ישראל.
לא רצינו לחסל את התאגיד ולסגור אותו.
את פרויקט תיקום השכונות בממשלת הימין היא זאת שביטלה.
כל שנה מחירי הדיור עלו ב8% ל10%.
אין שתי אמיתות. יש אמת אחת בלבד.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake.
So the whistle of Globes is a fact-check mechanism. It is just the beginning of fact-checking. It is just the beginning of fact-checking in Israel. So another one of the problems that we don't have here in Israel, like ethical code and values and vision, we also don't have fact-check profession in Israel. By the way, it is opposed the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. They do have fact checkers. So Israel is quite badly distinguished by that. We do also cooperation with Facebook, and what we do see, it's very influential. So there's almost no repetition since the whistle of Globes started to be activated. There's almost no repetition of false facts, which is quite amazing. Just before that, I thought Yair Lapid was saying about this 8% of housing prices. He said it all over the place. It was never right, but nobody checked. Nobody checked, and nobody shamed him. Another amazing fact about it is we also try to give good feedback when politicians say true facts, not only bad, and not only when they, lie or mislead us. And what they do with it is publish it in their social networks. So that's also a very good influence that we see. Agenda journalism, I think all the world just understood it when the Brexit fiasco happened, because the Brexit, the newspaper industry, they didn't do anything that was their role to do. They did not ask the relevant question. They did not ask if Brexit is the right solution for a xenophobia problem. They did not ask if Britain knows how to do polls. They didn't ask anything. What they did is show their opinion. Each newspaper showed their opinion on their cover. If they are if they into Brexit, they showed it with like good colors and good pictures. If they're against it, they showed it with the different colors. And this is how people choose. And this can happen in Israel any given moment now. The same thing with the newspapers here. And we have to take it into account. This is a real danger. Negativity and lack of compassion. You probably saw that in many newspapers in Israel. People go to custody like this, and the newspapers are choosing the most humiliating pictures, and then they publish it again and again and again, even if it's not relevant at all to the topic. What we did is to forbid it. We don't know when this habit started. It's very un-Jewish to do that. But for some reason it happened, and it ruined many, many lives here for people that even never, they didn't even get accused, I think. Lack of pluralism and representations. So I think most of you at least are aware to President Rivlin call to action about the tribes in Israel and how Israel changed to at least 4 tribes nowadays. And Rivlin call to action was in 2015, and then in 2016 he gave another speech. In this speech he said that I am afraid that the systems who shape our lives, politics, media, academy, business sector, etc., haven't fully absorbed those changes and haven't adjusted themselves to the new reality. The reality is about the education. It's about how the tribes in Israel work now. Last week, there was a header in Globes about 2 years of prison to a Haredi lawyer that betrayed her customer's face. And this is against our ethical code of not saying if someone is, by the way, it's only about Haredim, about settlers, and about Arabs. If it's not Israeli Arabs, Haredim, or settlers, nobody will say that you're a secular Israeli that did anything wrong. Okay? There's only 3 sectors that are being defined like that. We addressed it with the ethical code, and yet there was this headline. And again, I realized that a bit late, and I wanted Globes to apologize about it, and Globes did not want to apologize it, and I went to Facebook again. And I apologized in the name of Globes, and I asked, why did we say she's Haredi? For what reason? A headline before that was about this constructor. Did we say he's a secular constructor? No. And what was amazing, it was my, by far, most popular post ever. And I thought that social networks are only, you only get popular for like bad, negative posts. Apparently my former posts were just not interesting enough, because this was a totally positive post, and it went like, it was amazing. It spread it everywhere. I'm like a Haredi celeb now. I actually, after doing that, I also started to get so many pictures from other newspapers that use the Haredi Arabs. It's amazing how much it's popular now. We don't even see that. We're so used to that. This is just another example of the media not being enough inclusive in Israel. Of course, it's also with respect to women representation. So in media as a whole, it's from a UNESCO report from 2017, 1 out of 4 media decision makers is a woman, 1 out of 3 reporters, and 1 out of 5 experts interviewed is women. What we did in Globes is we doubled it, like by the minute. Now it's 40%. There's no convention of Globes or opinion columns that are not at least 40% either women or men. We do it also with Haredim. And we count everything. We count, and we're accountable to it. So it's also about covering Haredi economy. It's about covering Israeli Ethiopians, and not only in a negative context. We are actually measuring ourselves in all of those areas. We took the back cover of Globes and we dedicated it to the new economy. The new economy is not financial markets and real estate, because what we saw in all 3 financial newspapers in Israel, including Globes, of course, they cover almost solely, no offense, men that are 50 years old and more. They're secular, they live in Tel Aviv, they manage big corporations and not small, and it's mostly financial markets and real estate. So even as a business model, this just doesn't make sense. Like, how many people can I sell the newspaper to? Or I can move to a catheter industry. So now the back cover is dedicated to the new economy, and we measured this as well. So now it's a 6.4% up, but it's getting higher and higher. And we also surface critical issues that drive national conversation. So I didn't put here all the headlines that you guys probably know about this. It was a great thing that happened, that 200 CEOs in the United States signed the conscious capitalism letter. Nobody in Israel covers this. Okay, so nobody here knows about it. Globes covers this now, but these topics were never covered in Israeli financial newspaper. And this is, again, a not responsible, not accountable journalism, because our readers don't know that nobody covers this, and they should know it. Same goes with climate change. Until recently, it never arrived to the newspapers in Israel as a whole, by the way, and to financial newspapers. And it's a very deep and relevant financial issue that everybody should be aware of. So now we surface it, and we actually drive the national conversation. So in the last 2 months, you can't go in Israel without hearing about it, and I think Globes had a lot to do with it, not only the Amazonas, although it's a bigger forest than Globes. But it's also about long-term planning. It's about taking responsibility of the content that we give to our readers. Another issue is defining conversation borders. So there is the anarchy and there is democracy. There is effective criticism, there is negativity. There's freedom of speech and incitement, and we try to balance it. And that's quite a job, because whenever you try to balance it, people are saying that you are interfering with the freedom of speech, and most of them take me to court. That's the hobby of journalists in Globes, or former journalists in Globes. So Mati Golan was one of them. He's a columnist. He used to be a columnist, very famous, by the way, columnist in Globes, left-winged, who used to say really terrible things about both Haredim, about people that vote for Benjamin Netanyahu, about women. The most fun fact about it was that Naama, the editor-in-chief, and myself, we took him to the saying goodbye conversation, and he said he doesn't want to hear criticism from 2 girls. So it was quite self-evident. And then he, of course, went to court and sued me because I politically silenced him. Right after that, it happened with Eli Tzipori as well. Another columnist of Globes, now it was a right-wing columnist. The problem was about him checking facts, but nobody cares. They're all about being, whatever you say is now about political silencing people. Anyway, I am used to go to court. The last thing that I'm going to cover here is the lack of transparency. So the journals are the ones that are supposed to ask everybody else for transparency, but they're not transparent themselves. And that's definitely not trustworthy feeling. And what we try to do is we are publishing, it was the second year now, of the Trust Report of Globes. So Trust Report, we publish yearly a booklet that says everything that I actually told you now. So the ethical code is there and the vision. And if I have a real estate company that I established it before purchasing Globes. I write it there, so everybody knows my interest any given moment if I have other interests. And all the statistics that I showed you there are from here. So we measure ourselves and then we tell it to the public and we tell it to our readers, and what we try to do is to gain trust again. So I can't say it's not that 8 million people are now buying Globes and saying what a trustworthy newspaper, but we do believe it will happen. We also say full disclosure everywhere. It's not like a few words in a very small font. It's everywhere. I wanted it to be purple, but I'm not the editor. I wanted it because of the purple rose of you remember, of Cairo. Because I thought it's really like the Woody Allen thing. Like the newspaper is talking about themselves, so it should be purple. But Naama thought it could be blue. And now the question and relevant one is the business model. So trust is the ultimate currency. This is not me. This is Davos 2019. Davos has a tendency to talk about phenomenon 10 years after it happened. So we're probably like 20 years late with it, but we're still the pioneers in Israel. But if trust is the ultimate currency now, then Globes will have this currency. And another one is about if our business model relies, it's not only about ethics and values, but it's also about the club. So if we have a club, and the clubs is a masculine, corporate, secular Tel Aviv readers, and everybody is outside of this club. So it's the Arab and periphery and women and Mizrahi and disabled people and Ethiopians and small businesses and Haredim, just the beginning. I think we have a business model if we just include them. Building trust and business model are connected. So the whistle I showed you and the fake news fight and shaping public agenda and diversity, quality content, this is the way that we want to create a different and more valuable content, and we totally believe that people will follow, even if it takes some time. That's the order of it. We started with values, vision, and ethics. And if values, vision, and ethics are in place, that the people and the organization can be built on good roots. And if we have good people and an organization that is ethical, the content and product can be improved. And then marketing, distribution, and digital can actually work. And only then can more income be gained, and only then a real cost-cutting and effectiveness and productivity can be gained. So this is our path, and we're kind of there. We're at the more income stage now, and hopefully we will succeed. And to sum it up, why we need newspaper in 2020? Because of echo chambers and violent information and mix of opinions and facts and fake news and diversions and twisted information. And because we need here in Israel the inclusion of all tribes. And we do it with this self-regulation. Because trust is the new currency. And if you ask for our goal, or one goal, is to create informed citizens in Israel that actually know what they vote about. I'm an accountant in economics. I own an economic a newspaper, and I did not understand the gas settlement in Israel. How many of you did understand the gas settlement in Israel? Only one. Yeah. I'm quite suspicious of. Can you elaborate?
Yeah.
We all want to understand.
Yeah,
You work there.
Not there, not in Israel, but I work in Firon law firm, and it was one of our clients.
That's the only way to understand, and even then it's very questionable, because I think another law firm will say different things about it. But in Scandinavia, the model of democracy model is based on, it's also, quite small society, but then they have a different theme of democracy. People actually understand what they vote about. They don't vote with tribes. They vote because they understood the gas settlement, and they understood other issues, which we don't. They understand Brexit, if Brexit happens. And this is where we should aim. And this is where we aim. So that's our goal. And basically, this is my message. Happy Good Year.
And thank you so much for your talk and being the whistleblower.
The whistleblower, yeah.
It's very rare. But having said that, I don't believe you as any other news, like any other newspaper, have an agenda. Otherwise, you wouldn't contribute so much resources, time, and energy. So in the area of fake news and deep fake, actually there's so much data out there that everyone can correlate between any two things and scientifically says anything. So nowadays it seems that storyteller it have much more influence on people. Since actually the beginning of the evolution. So I would ask who cares about the actual facts that no one can check or not? Who cares about if something is true or not, if they don't believe it? Or if they just want to believe something? They will believe it if it's true by you or not. It's
firstly, it's a good question. It is a good question. And there is a possibility that what we do, nobody cares about. I take it into account. But another way of looking at it is we have 8 million citizens here, and some of them are they are against vaccines. Okay? And I will never manage to convince the vaccines, anti-vaccines tribe to believe anything. I don't even aim there. I think if there's 100,000 people that read good content, that's enough for Israel. Okay, 100,000 people are enough. So I don't need everybody. Nobody needs everybody. I don't expect nobody to just believe. Okay, what we do in the Whistle is to show all our resources, where we took the information, and the information is almost solely government information. That we can also say that the Lamas is not accurate, of course, but we need something like a common base to start with. So we can say the Lamas is our common base, and if the Whistle shows you exactly where it took the information from, you get more and more convinced with the Whistle's sayings. So that's another angle. We're trying to come up with this trust report, vision, values, ethical code, to gain trust back. We think if there's no at least one trustworthy source, fake news and deep fake will take everything we have. It happens in Finland nowadays. Finland is bordering with Russia, and Russia wants to take over Finland. And what Russia is really good at is mind games, and it tries to do mind games with the Finland population now, and trying to say to the people that they should not trust the government, and that's a real threat to Finland. The same thing can happen here. What Finland is doing is educating the kids from age 6 to identify fake news, and which sources they should trust, and which sources are reliable, and how to check it. It's a thing that should happen here in Israel. Nobody is taking care of it, but it should.
How good is your outreach to the Arab and Mizrahi, Haredi sectors, and how well can you target them and expand the reach?
Firstly, yet to be seen. We're trying now to expand there. I think we have a good potential there. Firstly, because we took Mati Golan out. Every Haredi that I met in the past 2 years said something bad about Mati Golan, saying bad things about Haredim. So this is the first thing. I think if we include the Haredim in the conversation, which we do, and we don't use this Haredi tagging if somebody does a crime, because everybody else does. I think there's a good potential for us to bring the Haredi to the conversation, and I think there's a big importance of the Haredi being in the same conversation that we are. It's like a medurat shevet. We need a medurat shevet so everybody will be, has the same talk at the same time. Hopefully, I hope to be here, next year and tell you more about the Haredim and Arab success. Hamza.
I have two questions.
One question.
Okay. I'll make the two questions into one. There is a company called, it's called, one second, let me tell you what it's called. Cambridge Analytics.
Yeah.
So we didn't understand point, but basically they are taking facts and...
Cambridge Analytics is dead now, but the workers are in other...
Cambridge Analytica is still working in the current Brexit. I just had this week, last week I had an amazing lecture about how they're affecting the Brexit.
Cambridge Analytics or maybe Cambridge Analytics ex-workers? I think the last, but anyway, doesn't matter. The same people, same method, it's okay.
The method is that they're taking facts and applying them into our minds, and because we consume news, and this is how we know what the facts are, and when you play a little bit with the facts, you don't need it, you don't change them, you just show them in a certain light, and that's how you can affect our decisions for voting and for whatever it is, and that is combined with the actual question is, when it comes to fake news or influencing our decisions, where is or what, in your opinion, is the reporter's achrayut about it? So if we know about the rabbi that is about 3 weeks ago, they took only one part of his election, changed and ended with "I'm sorry." What is the responsibility of someone who writes, who actually he's our food source for that? And I don't see today. You say every paper will say, self-regulatory, we are being checked and we're checking that we're fine, but where is your responsibility? You did something wrong, so if a lawyer is not fine, you say, okay, he should be punished. What do you think is the responsibility of...
Well, I showed you how, like the really big amount that the responsibility that I think media should have. Hopefully, but they not. You are right. It is not. They don't take responsibility nowadays. So, if that's the question.
No, I think saying I took the responsibility is not the cause and effect. If you did something wrong, for instance, you
need to be punished.
Yes. מה האכיפה לדעתך? מה האחריות שצריכה להיות התוצאות שישב וכתב טוב והתבדר שהוא קשקוש, מארץ הקשקושים, מלבד להגיד אני מצטערת זה לא מספיק טוב, כבר השפעת על 2 מיליון איש. מה את חושבת שצריך להיות מעוגן אולי בחוק או מעוגן באיזושהי צורה מסודרת? Sorry for the Hebrew.
וואי, איזה כיף, אני אענה גם בעברית. No, first of all, as I showed here, there's one journalist that I actually named him because it's well known now. Eli Tzipori, he didn't do like good fact check and he got fired. Okay, so this is one punishment. I think the newspaper should apologize, and I think there should be like financial sanctions or whatever. But there's no entity that can actually activate any sanctions. So if you ask me what my wishful thinking is, I think if Globes made the effort of having these values and ethical code, etc., what we want is for the Moetzat Eitonut or whatever to take this and to make it something that is relevant to all the newspapers. And then they can activate sanctions, which we can't. I'd be happy to be punished for this. We're taking the responsibility anyway. And I think this is it's the right lane. I think we should be responsible and should be accountable and should be punished when we do wrong. But at the moment, nobody is doing that. Nobody is even asking us to have an ethical code.
One more. Yeah, thank you. So, thank you very much for coming.
You have to explain me the gas settlement first. There is a price to everything.
Not 5 hours?
I understand why nobody understood it. So you understand it, you can give it to me in 5 brief hours.
But I bill like 1 month. So. My question is, if we want to progress economic freedom in Israel, how can we educate journalists to write more about that and inform the public about this kind of option? Because most of us never learned it in school, for example, or in university sometimes.
Studying journalism, studying economics.
I said in Hebrew, if it isn't clear. איך אנחנו יכולים לחנך עיתונאים או ללמד אותם, לידע את הציבור אודות שוק חופשי וחירות כלכלית בישראל? כי אני מרגיש שרובם יודעים שלמשל, לא יודע, ארגוני עובדים יש לזה השלכות שליליות, אבל לגבי שאר הדברים הם לא מרחיבים מספיק לציבור.
אתה מרגיש נכון. Unfortunately, this is not the only thing they don't know about. But we initiated in Globes, it's just baby steps of Globes School. We are just starting to try to educate our journalists and maybe later on others, newspapers as well. And hopefully we'll collaborate with the Friedberg institution, for example, in order to educate more. Not only about ethics, but ethics is a thing that should be educated as well. Nobody learns that in school. This is why we read this trans fat, because not economics, not free market, but not only that, but also ethics. And what is the work of a journal, and what is the vision, and why are we here? None of this is being taught now. So hopefully hopefully the Moetz Ha'Itonut will take care of this as well. But we're only there for 1 month, so maybe next month it will all happen. I'm quite positive. Thank you.